Today is Wednesday, March 31st. Let's go over your memory scripture, Luke 19:10. It says, "For the Son of Man has come to seek and to save that which was lost." Luke 19:10. On Monday, our lesson was about Nicodemus, who was a religious leader. Everyone had heard of Jesus and all of his teachings and the miracles that he had been performing. And the religious leaders, they always had an issue with everything that Jesus did. But Nicodemus was quite different. He wanted to know about what Jesus spoke about, and he wanted to speak to Jesus face to face. So Nicodemus went and met with the Lord in secret. And one of the things that he talked about with the Lord was being born again. And Nicodemus didn't quite understand what Jesus meant whenever he said, in order for you to see the kingdom of heaven, you had to be born again. Nicodemus was like, how could we be born again when we're born already? But Jesus wasn't speaking of a physical birth, like a baby being born, but he was speaking of a spiritual birth, a birth that would take place on the inside, a heart change, you turning away from sin and turning towards the Lord. It's a change that happens on the inside of us, and it's only done by believing in Jesus and also receiving his spirit. But Nicodemus still was not understanding. So the Lord gave him an analogy of the wind. He says, think about the wind, Nicodemus. He was like, we don't see the wind. We can't actually see it, but we see the evidence of the wind. We see it blow. We see the trees move. We see all of that. Now, we can't go and physically find the wind, but we know that it's there. He says, well, it's the same with the Spirit. We see the evidence of the Spirit because we see the change that people have whenever the Spirit of God enters into their life. And so Nicodemus still wasn't quite understanding. And Jesus is like, Nicodemus, you're a religious leader. You're supposed to teach the people the truth, and you don't even know the truth. So then Jesus began to teach him about in Exodus, whenever the Hebrews were in the wilderness and how they were complaining. And so the Lord sent snakes in the camp of Israel, and it began to bite the people, and people were dying from the snake bites. And so the people asked Moses to please get rid of the snakes. And so God told Moses to make what's called a brass serpent. And that's here on the picture. And the Lord said that anyone that would look upon the brass serpent would be healed from the snake bites. And so Jesus brought that analogy because the religious leaders studied the scriptures of Moses, especially the law of Moses. So he knew Nicodemus would know exactly what story he was talking about. So Nicodemus knew exactly what the Lord referred to. And Jesus said, well, it's the same thing with the Son of Man. He will be lifted up, and all of those who look towards him and his death on the cross shall be saved and shall be born again. They will receive a new life, a spiritual birth. So that is what Jesus was speaking about when he told Nicodemus about being born again. It's a spiritual thing. Remember, spiritual things are the things that we cannot see, but we'll see the evidence of it. And that's what Jesus was saying. He says someone who used to lie or steal or do all kinds of bad things, once they encounter the Spirit of God and God changes them, they will not continue to do those things anymore, because you cannot truly meet the Lord and stay the same. You will have to change. Nicodemus understood and became a secret follower of Jesus, because remember, he's a religious leader, and the religious leaders don't like Jesus and his teachings. And so Nicodemus had to keep it a secret that he did believe in the Lord. But we'll talk about him again whenever Jesus is crucified. We'll see Nicodemus again. So Jesus and his disciples would often go to different cities where Jesus would preach the word, and he would also perform many miracles. One day, Jesus and his disciples wanted to go from Judea to Galilee. Now, if you look on the map here, Judea is on the bottom in blue, and then Galilee is in the north up top in like the red. Now, if you look, there's a city in between Judea and Galilee, and it's called Samaria. Samaria was the city that you would have to pass through in order to travel from Judea to Galilee. Problem is, the Hebrews did not like the people in Samaria. They did not like to travel through Samaria. So they would go like a whole different route so that they wouldn't travel through the city of Samaria. Why they didn't like the people of Samaria? Well, the Hebrews believed that the temple should only be in Jerusalem, which it was, But the Samaritan people built their own temple in Samaria. So the Hebrews had an issue with that. Also, the Samaritan people were a mixed blood people, meaning they weren't 100% Hebrew, but they were mixed with other things as well. So the Hebrews didn't feel like they were real Hebrews, the Samaritans, because they were mixed blood. So because of all of this, the Hebrews chose not to associate or be around the Samaritans. But Jesus was about to change that. Whenever they were going to travel from Judea to Galilee, he told his disciples that he needed to go to Samaria, that he needed to pass through the city of Samaria. And I'm sure his disciples might have been like, yeah, but we don't really. But they listened to the Lord, and so they went. While they were traveling through the city of Samaria, they stopped in a city inside of Samaria called Sychar, and that's where Jesus rested at the well. He told his disciples to go ahead of him, and they were going to go into the town to get something to eat, and Jesus was going to wait at the well for them to return. But the Lord had a plan why he was going to wait there. He was about to change someone's life, and that's why he knew he needed to go to Samaria, because it wasn't just about her, but it was about the people in Samaria as well. They deserved to know the Lord just like everyone else. So that means because you don't like someone, it doesn't mean that they can't know Jesus. The Hebrews didn't like the Samaritans, but Jesus is like, I can still save them. And that's what he was going to do. So as Jesus is sitting at the well one day, a woman comes up to the well. And she comes, she doesn't say anything to Jesus because she knew he was a Hebrew. And so she knows the Hebrews don't speak to us. So she wasn't about to speak to him. So she comes to the well to get water. And then Jesus turns to her and says, give me a drink. Remember, the disciples had left and they had went into the city to buy food. So it was just him and her. And so she was shocked because Jesus was speaking to her, a Hebrew. She didn't know he was Jesus. She just knew he was a Hebrew. And also because he's asking her for a drink. She's like, sir, how are you being a Hebrew asking to get a drink from me, a Samaritan woman? For you know the Hebrews don't deal with the Samaritans. And Jesus answered her and said, if you knew the gift of God that was right before you, he says, you would be asking me for a drink. You would have asked me to give you living water. So she was a little confused, and she's like, but sir, you don't have anything for me to get you any water. And also, what are you talking about living water? This is just a regular well where you get water from. And Jesus says, the living water that I am speaking about is that whoever drinks of this water that I give will never thirst again. He says, when you drink from this well, you have to come back and get water again, which is true. That's how we are as humans. When we're thirsty, we drink, and then we get thirsty again eventually, and then we'll have to drink again. And so Jesus is saying the well right here, it doesn't keep you satisfied. You always have to come back to get water over and over again. But Jesus says, but the water that I'm speaking about, this living water that I can give you, he says, whoever drinks from this water shall never, ever thirst again. And so she was kind of amazed when Jesus said that. She's like, sir, well, give me this water so that I won't thirst again, and so that I don't have to come back to this well to get more water. But what she didn't understand was that this was a spiritual thing that Jesus was speaking about. It wasn't necessarily physical water that we can see, but it was a spiritual thing. Remember, with Nicodemus, that's what the Lord has spoke about, the spiritual things, the things that we can't see. And this living water that Jesus was speaking about was his spirit. Not only are we born again when we receive the spirit and we are changed, but Jesus also satisfies our soul. Everything that we could long for and that we could want is found in him. And when we receive his spirit, he satisfies our longing souls. The soul often, when you're lost, it wants different things. It's trying to find things to be happy. Some people go their whole lives, thinking that having money, having all kinds of things will satisfy them, and it doesn't. It's kind of like what Jesus was saying with the water. You got to drink it again and again because it doesn't satisfy you. But when we receive the Spirit of God, he satisfies us. And when we have the Lord, we realize, man, God is everything that I need. My joy, my peace. He's my provider. Everything that I need comes from him. He is the only one that can satisfy our souls. Nothing else can. And this woman needed to hear that, because then Jesus tells her, he says, okay, you want the living water? Well, go and call your husband to come here. And she says, I have no husband. And Jesus said, yes, I know. He says, you don't have a husband, for you already have 5 husbands, and the person you're with now is not your husband. So this woman, her issue was she had multiple husbands, and that was probably because she was not satisfied with life. So she thought that having different husbands was the answer, when that was not the answer at all. She really needed the Lord. But of course, when Jesus began to call out her sin and her issue of having multiple husbands, she tried to change the subject. And she says, she said, well, sir, I know that you are a prophet because you are telling me things like this. She says, so our fathers have worshipped on this mountain. And when you Hebrews say that Jerusalem is the only place where people can worship. So she was speaking about the temple. Remember, I told you that the one of the reasons the Hebrews didn't like the Samaritans was because they had a temple in Samaria. Well, that's what she was asking about. She was like, y'all are mad at us for building a temple. She was like, but Jacob, our forefather, worshipped here on this mountain. So that's why we have a temple here, because he worshipped here. But Jesus knew what she was trying to do. She was trying to change the subject because she didn't want to talk about her sin. So Jesus said, listen, he says, woman, the time is coming where you will neither worship in this mountain or in Jerusalem. It won't even matter where you worship. He says, what will matter is that you worship me in spirit and in truth. That's who the Father is seeking, for those to worship him that way. God is a spirit, and those who worship him must worship him in spirit and truth. And so the Lord was telling her, like, look, a change is coming. It's not even going to matter about the temple anymore, or about where you worship, or any of that. The Lord said is what's going to matter is that you worship God through his spirit, and also through his truth, which is his word, and also through Jesus, because he is the spirit and the truth. And so after that, she says, I know that the Messiah is coming, and so he's going to explain all of these things to us. So Jesus looked at her. He says, I am the Messiah. And she just was shocked, because she didn't realize this whole time she had been speaking to the Messiah, the one who was telling her he could give her living water. He could satisfy her soul. He knew that she didn't have a husband. All of that. She didn't realize that this man that she was speaking to was the Messiah. Immediately, whenever she realizes that this is the Messiah, she gets amazed, and she's like, oh my goodness, you are the Lord. And she believed immediately, and she drank of the living water right then and there, the spiritual water that she was asking about, that Jesus told her about. She drank of the water, and she believed. And she didn't just believe, she was so amazed at this that she went and ran into the city and told everyone, come see a man who told me all of the things I ever did. Could this be the Christ? So everyone in the city, whenever she went and told them about the Lord that she met at the well, they came to the city. And in the meantime, the disciples had returned, and they were like, okay, Jesus, here you go ahead and eat. But Jesus said, I don't want to eat right now. I have work to do. He says, my food is to do the will of God who sent me. And what Jesus meant by that was that he came to do a work here in Samaria, on the earth, but also in Samaria. He's like, I don't even want to eat right now. He says, look, the people are hungry here. They are thirsty for the spiritual things. They need me right now in Samaria. And that's exactly what the people did. When she went and told them, the people came to the well so that they could hear Jesus. And when they heard him preach and teach and testify, they all believed in him. And so they actually asked Jesus to stay for 2 days. Remember, Jesus and his disciples were just passing through Samaria, but instead, when the people came, they begged Jesus to stay for 2 extra days to preach to them. And so the woman believed, and the people also said, we believe as well, because we have heard him for ourselves. So see, the Lord knew he needed to pass through Samaria. He knew that the Samaritan people needed him, and that's exactly why he stopped there, rested at the well. He told the woman everything that she needed to hear. Then she went and told the people in the city, and look how change has happened in the city of Samaria. That is our Bible lesson today about the woman at the well, and how she drank of the living water, and how the people of Samaria also drunk of the living water, and they believed in Jesus.